The beautiful thing about somatic grounding, which is really what we'll get into today, is that when we are grounded in our body and we are moving at our pace in our body in the moment, we're less likely to move from that survival brain. When we are in our bodies, we're more likely in touch with the fullness of us, as opposed to moving from the back reptilian part of our brains. That's just like, all right, what am I going to do? What am I going to do to survive? Right? When we're grounded on our body, we can actually act from a different place that might incorporate more of our wisdom, more of our awareness, and our actual holistic functioning. But first, before we do that, we actually have to know how to ground in our bodies. So much of grounding in our bodies is the dance, the practice of balancing what we are carrying and what we have to release. Right? Because our bodies, our mason jars, have limited capacity. As abundant as we are in so many ways, our bodies actually have a limited capacity to hold energy or to hold stuff, stimulation from around us. And if we are taking a lot in, right, and not allowing ourselves to release it, and this is not in the overgiving practice, right? This is not in the overgiving. Giving to others can be a way to output, but if you're giving from a lack of generativity, then it is kind of an emptying process that can be not generative at all. So the input and the output has to be in balance. Same with the internal and external focus. If we are in dialogue with someone, say someone who is really, really disturbed, really upset, and we are so engrossed in what they're saying, we're likely going to take on a lot of that helplessness or overwhelm or sadness or grief or anger or whatever, or anxiety. And then if we're both sitting in that, how are we going to help each other? It's going to be very difficult, right? Maybe from that point in time, you might try to attempt to help somebody from that fear-based thinking. How do I fix this? How do I make it all better? How do I, it's more reactive as opposed to really grounded and effective. Whereas if you are maintaining also an internal focus of yourself, what, and your breath and your groundedness and how what you're hearing is affecting you from this person who is venting, for example, you're in a much better, more spacious, potentially position to be an actual presence for them. Maybe it doesn't fix the issue, but it helps them move through their feelings without you taking it on for them. So we'll talk and practice more around this, because these are tangible and very accessible skills that you can remember or bring to your life on a daily basis with whatever it is that you're consuming, whether it be a conversation or the media or whatever, even food. So with that being said, I know that you come here with plenty of wisdom already, and that you have spent your life maybe consciously and maybe just by default learning how to cope and also how to nurture yourself. So what makes you feel grounded and present in your body? Feel free to drop it in the chat or vocalize it. I'd love to hear from a few of you.
I can speak to this. Um, I think I have a really busy mind, so movement really helps me. I mean, I love to dance too. I'm a dancer, so definitely dance, but also walking. I've tried a lot of meditation, and it doesn't work as well as like a walking meditation does. Yeah.
Yeah, the stillness can be in itself kind of triggering or like dissociative. So yeah, movement like dancing, running, yoga, breath work, all of these kind of like active things, and then things like playing music, singing, um, creating art. Yeah, I would say any place where I can feel like I can accept like where I am.
Thank you. I'm noticing the chat and I see silence, writing and singing, breathing, temperature changes, and specific scents like lavender, Kundalini breath work. Okay. Yes, absolutely. I'm hearing a lot of body-based practices like movement, like smells, also output-based practices like singing or breathing, making. Yes, that makes sense. Absolutely. And also just this concept of spaciousness or silence, emptiness to some degree, stillness for some or whatever. Again, to mediate or eliminate some of the stimulation, some of the output. So even if it's not actively outputting, so excuse me, input. So even if it's not actively outputting, there is a way to also just like minimize the input. Yeah, that's one way. Taking cleanses from social media or media cleanses from all media is a way to ground for me in my body. I'm on a break right now. It just helps me feel closer to myself. And it's a boundary. Yeah. So we're doing these all the time. Okay. So I want to talk just about a few things here. I'm going to invite you to practice even as I'm going through this. Also, thanks for sharing, Celine. Getting my hands in the dirt, gardening, building. Yes, totally. Yeah, aligning with the frequency of nature is one of the best ways to output and release that energy. Yeah, one of my teachers and friends, Shilpa, talks about how the earth is the supreme composter of energy and on all of our energies, whether it be rage or grief or tiredness. I mean, the earth kind of takes it and composts it and creates from it. So yeah, that's a beautiful way to output. So as I talk about this, I really invite you to practice and notice and just observe what this is like, okay? This is a technique and it's so simple, okay? So forgive me at how simple it is. And I invite you to go past the intellect, which might say, this is basic. What the hell? I didn't come here for this basic shit. I invite you to actually let your body experience it. So in therapy school, one of the few things that resonated with me the most was this practice, which we learned when it comes to, for example, being in the room with someone who's going through a lot of trauma or expressing a lot of trauma or really traumatized, and how to stay present with them without dissociating or without trying to intellectualize or without getting caught up too much in, for example, my own stuff or getting triggered even. And that is feeling your feet on the ground. Literally, as simple as it is. I mean, that is grounding. Really just feeling your feet on the ground and even noticing the subtle movements in your toes. And I really invite you to do this at this point in time and just notice what it's like to simultaneously balance the focus of your feet and your toes, even wherever they are, as well as what I'm saying. And notice the distance that it potentially creates between what I'm saying and you. Yeah. So I'm not saying anything really intense right now. I'm not telling a gripping story, which naturally would make us lean in and be like, ooh, tell me everything I want to know. But really, it is a way to create a little bit of energetic distance between you and whatever is in front of you. And we can practice this while we're watching TV. We can practice this while we're talking to our boss who has all the opinions. We can practice this when we are talking to a friend that might be taking too much space because she's going through a breakup and you're just like, oh, okay, I want to be here for you, but whatever it is that you are dealing with, this can be something that you practice. We can also practice this when we're going into that spiral of, I really need to give. I need to give more. I'm afraid they're going to leave me. I'm afraid they're going to think I'm a bad friend. I'm afraid that I'm not a good enough daughter, granddaughter, whatever, right? even this practice of noticing our feet on the ground in its beautiful simplicity, maybe even annoying simplicity, can give us space between our head and the thoughts that go off from that fear-based thinking and our feet. It's not a coincidence that our heads and our feet are the furthest distance from each other, yet are still on our person. So if we're noticing that we're in our heads a lot, we need to give our feet more love, and we need to ground and feel that. So tell me, just even in that space of experimentation, of noticing your feet on the ground more, even as we're talking, what did you notice?
Okay, this is really weird because I feel like I have done hundreds of grounding exercises in my life, and I never thought about this before. But what came into my head when you were talking about that, sort of like just having that little bit of space between what was going on, and almost what it made me think of was a reminder that I still exist.
Yes.
Which is really weird. I don't know what that means, but the thought that is going through my mind right now about those types of grounding exercises, I never thought about it in that way before.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, it's these simple things that matter, right? When we think about when we're talking about boundaries, right? How easy when we're over giving or when we're oversharing, what is actually happening there? We're forgetting that, oh, I'm actually here. This is the space that I'm taking up. This is me in this moment, right? And I don't have to overcompensate with anything. I'm right here. I'm here. I exist. I'm in this. And that could sometimes be enough. But I think what you just shared is also just more nuanced and even deeper, that doesn't need more words to be added to it.
I also see this in the chat, but basic does not mean easy, and simple does not mean easy. Really, I don't know, for me, like those are the ones that almost feel like there's always something else to expand into with these types of practices, because in some ways there's nothing simple. I mean, there's nothing basic about connecting to like the network of the earth.
Yeah, I mean, I stand humbled in a way, because yeah, I mean, this isn't basic and simple. Maybe I need to not say that, because it's deeply complex. And also, it's hard, I feel like, because our minds want something more to anchor into or ground into. Like it's basic and simple, I think, to the intellect, but to the reality of the whole situation and the tapestry of beauty and nuance, it's so deep and so profound.
I'm wondering if anyone has the experience of like wanting to retract their feet at all despite wanting the grounding. Just on the topic of it being like an easy thing to do, it's like yes, I'm my feet down, it's easy, but I find that like the instinct to pop them right back up is like strong, and I don't really know what to make of that. Curious if anyone else is experiencing that.
Well, I'm curious, Alyssa, what would it be like to let them pop up? Like, would that actually feel more grounding for you? Even if they're not on the ground, maybe they want to be in a different posture. What did you notice about that?
I think I've felt before, particularly the need to put my feet down. So and when I get in the chair, I immediately pull my feet up. So I've thought before, like, I think it'd feel better to put them down, and then I find them coming back up, and then I'm like, why? So I found that now too, where it's like I'll bring them back up, and then I'm like, I want them. It's like this really weird push and pull kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know either. And that's totally okay. And maybe it's a different point of contact for you or for anyone else. Like maybe it's not your feet, maybe it's your bum, right? Like maybe it's like your seat in the chair that's actually what's grounding, or your back against your seat that's grounding, right? There are different points of contact that can give us that sense of, oh, I'm here in my body. I'm here. I'm seated. I'm supported. I'm held. Literally, we are held in the seat that we're sitting in. Right? Like even just that simple realization, again, brings us down. And I'm saying simple and basic again, because this is just like the ways and the common sense of the body Like the body speaks in simplicity. It speaks in sometimes clarity. Sometimes we just don't know what the fuck is happening and what our bodies are telling us. That's very real too. But really, when we, when we're speaking from the heart, there's not a lot of words. It's very simple. It's, I love you. It's, I'm here for you. It's, I hear you. Right?
Can I share?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm sitting on my bed, so my feet are not on the ground, but I just like I connected my feet to each other and I started having like sensation and awareness in that part of my body because usually my feet are also like very cold and now I actually feel like the warmth and connection and I was like, ooh, that feels very grounding. So now that like encouraged me to be a little bit more aware of like my body and what do I want to do to stay more grounded. So yeah, it's just it's nice to be in that space where I'm like, ooh, okay, I'm in a space where I can like take care of myself.
Yeah. Thanks for offering that. Yeah, Jess.
Well, something that's coming to heart and mind, especially Alyssa, as you elevated that question, and Chetna, as you kind of expanded on that, is sort of, and I find myself just in this seating, I've been going back and forth, side to side, excuse me. And I'm like, Jazzy, stop. Like, it's probably very distracting or whatever, but also having to allow myself to think and just be graceful and like patient with myself and allowing myself to feel that. And like, that's what came, and just kind of being gentle with myself. If I do want to stretch or move, like, that's okay. Cause that's what this human experience needs at this time.
Thank you. Yes. Swaying is such a totally self-soothing mechanism, like biologically and primally in our bodies. I mean, we sway children to sleep, and we also sway our bodies when we're anxious or just naturally. So that's a great way to self-soothe and ground too. It's a grounding methodology. Yeah. And that's important, right? Like this reclaiming of our body's needs and the simplicity and wisdom of our bodies is so important, not only in this moment, but also when we are in tough conversations or when we are in tough dialogue with ourselves. Like, oh, what if I don't give here? I don't want to. I'm feeling depleted, but I really am afraid of like not, them leaving or whatever, right? Whatever comes up. If we find our grounding, that's when we are able to distinguish like, oh, I'm really afraid. I'm afraid of this, but this is also what I need. And this is what I need, actually. Right. Again, when we are afraid, we're moving from, survival-based space in our nervous system. And that's not where we're able to be empowered in our boundaries or connected and attuned to our own emotions. The other two that I want to offer, and also just naming that, these are three of so many grounding practices that your body naturally wants to take. And what I hope out of these is that they might just remind you of what's accessible to you, or give you more insight into, oh, I really like to sway sometimes, or, oh, I really like to doodle or lay down on the ground and look at the ceiling or whatever, right? To ground. But the other, and this I'm really thinking about, when we are in conversation or in dialogue, or even just in the inner dialogue of our fears and our inner critic and what we really want from our heart spaces or from our solar plexus, a more wise or empowered place. How do we navigate these spaces, right? When we're in some kind of inner or outer dialogue. Two ways in which we will employ as an exercise here is, again, these common universal cliche type things that our bodies just soak up and that our minds tend to judge, right? Is coming back to our breath, right? We talked about meditation being able to be done through walking or moving or sitting still. A meditation can also be in conversation with ourselves or with others. And it's another way to bring back our focus, to reclaim our focus for ourselves as well. And that actually makes us a more present companion or more present friend or more present whatever to whoever we're with, paradoxically, even though we're incorporating our own existence in that matter, right? Like, okay, I'm giving some focus to me and my breath so that I can be more present here and in my own boundary and presence and existence, while I'm still giving you enough of my attention without taking on so much of your story. So I invite us to also practice this now, wherever your feet is, wherever your seat is, and just really noticing your breath, noticing the flow of your breath, even as you're listening to me, right? And if it feels like your listening is incomplete, it's just different is what I'm going to say. It's maybe just different than how you normally listen to other people. If it feels incomplete or if it feels like, oh, you're not focused enough to hear everything, it's just different. And in actuality, this might make you a better listener. The second thing that I'll share now, or really the third thing before we go into practice, is also subtle mindful touch. This I employ so much when I'm in session with folks, or when even I'm feeling really overwhelmed in a conversation. And subtle mindful touch could literally look like just this, like a thumb grazing my other thumb. Super subtle. It could even just look like feeling my hands in my lap, or even just a hand on the heart like this casually. Sometimes it can be casual, and really noticing that, right? These are so subtle that normally, given that we are always touching ourselves, we are not, it's actually in service for us to not notice our touch all the time. But when we unionize our mind and our body to incorporate that touch, it's powerful, because the body actually doesn't know the difference between being touched by someone we trust and being touched by us mindfully. We release the same cuddly, juicy, connecting hormones as we do if we're hugged by someone we love, compared to if we're hugging ourselves and being aware of what that feels like, especially if it's 20 seconds or longer. So this subtle movement is a way, again, to bring back our energy to us and to balance our focus on ourselves and also others. So as I brought those in, what did you notice, however you practiced it in the moment?
I liked the thumb one. And as I was doing it, I could hear everything you were saying, but it was like the volume was turned down. And like the volume of my thumbs were turned up. I don't know. But like it was like I'm doing it right now and I'm like, yes, this feels really good. So I'm gonna try that. And also when Chenna, you were talking about like grounding in our feet, I didn't immediately I went from wiggling my toes. So like that friction felt really good. And I think it's like the same friction with like the thumb. So yeah, it feels good.
As you were like naming it, then I noticed that I was already doing it and like have been. And I don't think I just even realized what that was actually doing for me. I think I maybe named it or sort of like had it in my brain in a different way, or just like mindlessly, kind of doing it. So I really appreciate, because as soon as you named it as like mindful touch and I became more like aware, then I was able to notice like what it was giving me. So thank you for that.
Your body's already doing it. Our bodies are already serving us in this way. How can we allow our minds to serve our bodies too? By noticing it. And by noticing it, we become mindful and aware of it, and it amplifies its potency and power.